When it comes to the winter, there's absolutely no getting away from the fact that the carp become a lot harder to catch. Now, just last week, I had a really good session over on Brasenose 1 using this exact mix, what I'm just about to run you through here. Now, first things first, when it comes to this time of year, I'm not putting as much bait in, or should I say I'm putting nowhere near as much bait in as what I would be sort of come March, April time, when the water starts to warm up and the fish are more sort of actively looking for a lot more bait. This is the mix that I use, very simple, and there's a few things that I do that I feel sort of give me a little bit more of an edge than maybe the next guy. Now, the base of this mix is Monster Chili. Like I said, with the Monster Chili, you don't need a lot of it. It absolutely stinks to high heaven. It is loaded full of attraction, and this time of year, I'm not looking to put loads and loads of bait in. I'm just looking to feed a real tight bed of attraction. I've got sort of chopped and mulched up krill in there as well. Now again, a lot of people might sort of associate krill with being used in the warmer weather when the water's a lot warmer. For me, using a bait that people would primarily use throughout the course of the year, sometimes taken into the winter, can be a massive advantage. Now the reason that I believe that's a big advantage is because people spend all sort of the better months, if you like, feeding a bait only to get to this time of year when the fish can become harder to catch, like I say, and then switch baits and expect the fish to instantly turn onto a bait that they haven't seen for sort of the majority of the year. Manila works fantastically. I've caught loads of fish, but sometimes when you think, I wonder if I'd have caught more doing or using a bait that I use in the summer, give it a try, because sometimes, like I say, it can work. And that's what I used last week. Got a little bit of sweet corn in there as well. Again, not loads of sweet corn. Now the reason why I don't put loads of sweet corn and more visual stuff in the mix this time of year is purely and simply because the water's a lot clearer, there's a lot more bird life, and it makes locating my spod mix a lot easier than what it would do in the warmer months. To this mix, all I would add to it is a pinch of bloodworm, not loads, and a little bit of chopped worm. Now the reason why I haven't got it in here now is because I put it in just before I'm about to spod, and I think that is a massive key element to whenever you're using natural bait, whether it be bloodworm, maggots, casters, chopped worm, is always put that natural bait in just before you're about to put the bait out. Now with natural baits, the last thing that you want to be doing is pouring them all into your spod mix, spodding it out, putting the lid on the bucket. The rest of the mix is sat there, it's at the front of the swim, there's no air getting to it, and all the natural bait is almost fermenting almost instantly. And as good as natural bait can be, natural bait, when it starts to turn, can be a massive fish repellent. So that is the mix, and to be honest, what I've made up on this bucket is probably enough for about 3 or 4 spoms, which is all I'd be looking to put in. I put this out fresh, clean the bucket out, and then when I come to topping up the spot, or after I've had a bite, last week was very prolific, so I was making sort of 3 or 4 spodfuls, or sponfuls should I say, worth of bait after each fish, making it fresh every single time. You wouldn't want to go out and eat a meal that's been sat on the table for 4 or 5 hours. You expect your food to be fresh, so I sort of have the same theory when it comes to carp fishing. So that's the mix that I'm using, and the rig that I'm using, you can see here, is my standard Illusion D rig, and the hook bait that I'm using is very small. Now I've got a tiny whittled down 12mm Manila pop-up, so it becomes a wafter, and that is tipped off with just 4 or 5 maggots. Now the reason why I'm using such a small hook bait is because the bait that I'm feeding, the largest item of bait in here is probably a grain of sweet corn. If I was fishing bigger particles or bigger items of bait, then I'd look to increase the size of the hook bait. But fishing smaller particles and smaller bait like I am, the last thing you want to be doing is having 3 massive standout hook baits sitting right above it. And that is on a very long rig. Now when you're spodding with a sort of smaller, finer particle mix like what I use quite a lot of, when you're spodding it, you know, if you were spodding it in sort of 4 or 5 feet of water, it's falling down and it isn't really spreading that far. But up here at Linear on Brasenose last week, I was spodding this into 16 feet of water. So I'm looking to get my bait in as accurately as possible. And by the time a sponful of this bait goes down and lands on the bottom, it's probably covering an area, I reckon, sort of 6 feet in diameter. So I've got a nice long rig. It's a very slow sinking presentation, and the fish aren't necessarily feeding as hard as what they would be if you were feeding larger items. They're literally sifting through the small particle items, and you don't really want a heavy hook bait there. So I've got a nice light hook bait on a very long rig, and a smelly, potent mix with some added naturals for extra attraction.